I was thinking this morning, I have thoughts.
No.
I got thoughts, I know, right? It's dangerous. So we all know now Westover is not undefeated.
Oh, this morning, Westover is undefeated. His team was not undefeated.
Got it. Okay. The Westover's undefeated.
I didn't play.
That's fair. That's fair. So he went through a grueling practice this morning and got tired watching his young men run.
They did a little running this morning, yeah.
Oh, all right. I was thinking of asking you about that and the discipline and things like that you are distilling on these young men that are playing basketball. I mean, these are 14, 15-year-old boys.
Yeah, 13 to 15, yeah.
13 to 15 boys. And very important age for development.
Very true.
And what we pick up when we're that old and typically starts to gain some momentum. And we run because we have an authority figure, a coach, or we write a bunch of things on a chalkboard. I had to do that a few times because a teacher or somebody or I'd have to go do an extra set of chores at home or whatever. We didn't have the timeout thing when I was growing up. We had the...
Yeah, I don't remember if I was sent to my room, but timeout, against the wall, that didn't exist.
That was a new thing when I heard that word. Play date and timeouts. Those were like, what in the Sam is going on here? What happened?
I used to call my own friends, right, and talk to their parents instead of my mom and arranging for their mom to bring them over.
Right. Hey, Johnny, can you hang?
Exactly.
Or you just showed up. I mean, that's kind of what
some moms were scary to talk to, too. Like, you had to learn.
You had to learn
talk
to
adults. Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
Ma'am. I mean, it was like Eddie Haskell. We were all, and nobody out there knows who Eddie Haskell is anymore. But we had to kind of get to know, you're right, the parent thing. And so if they didn't like you, you
snuck in the back door.
You still figured a way.
Yeah.
You still figured a way. But I was thinking, we've shared, the Arizona firm and the Westover firm have shared so many clients for so many years, and we've both seen one thing in common. We see a lot in common for a minute, and then you kind of take that individual that has immigration concerns from there. And sometimes those go on for a long period of time, and sometimes they don't go on for as long. But the one thing I think we shared, this is what my thought was, and I wanted to see kind of what your thoughts on it were, is the fear. There's a legitimate fear that I get when we share a client, when our firm shares a client with your firm. And I have my attorneys coming over to me saying, okay, every person that has a document issue, whether they have current documents, it might be that may have, this criminal offense might, and it's not just criminal, actually. I was thinking about this. It's in a divorce case where somebody's in proceedings and they're getting divorced from their equity. So I wanted to
the person that petitions them, sure.
Yeah. And so what does that mean? A person that petitions them. So
most family-based immigration, and we deal with lots of immigration, whether it be employment, family-based, or some kind of deportation defense. And to be honest with you, that maybe is the same answer with deportation defense, because we have to have qualifying relatives, whether they be children, parents, or spouses. But on family-based immigration, you always got a petitioner. And basically that's the person that's sponsoring you. And family-based immigration, it can be a brother, sister, parent, or child, spouse as well, excuse me. And so, when there's a divorce, like you're saying, or a family law issue where we're either losing custody of a kid and that would affect a deportation case, because part of a deportation defense case is you're trying to tell the judge that your family would suffer, your qualifying relative would suffer an extreme and unusual hardship if you were not present in the United States. And so if custody is taken away from you in some way, that qualifying relative argument isn't very strong, because the mother's basically in charge of that, or the father, depending on who's in, immigration proceedings. Or on a family-based, straight case, it's not deportation defense. If you get a green card and you were married less than 2 years, that green card's conditional, which means it's conditioned on you staying married for the next 2 years, and you have to file an additional application. I've got 2 people in my office today, as I was looking at my calendar, that are coming in that we did their green cards for, and they're saying, hey, my petitioner, my spouse, doesn't want to be married anymore. I know one of the cases I just got approved in January. So it's under 2 years, and we're going to have a problem. So it's not unsolvable, but it makes it a lot more complicated for us. We have to prove good faith marriage since the beginning, and there's lots of evidence of either spousal abuse or infidelity or whatever we have to prove in order to say that we need to be waived from the provision of keeping this marriage valid through the years.
Isn't it interesting that they go that deep into it in the immigration courts, wherein you roll into the divorce court
And they don't care.
and they don't. It's just like, okay, well, it's over. It's where's the place to sign?
And I think the purpose of that is obviously, to eliminate fraud marriages, to eliminate somebody who's going to marry somebody for papers, some kind of financial arrangement. Obviously in the United States, we have the right, and it's an inherent right by the Constitution, to marry and divorce as we please. Hasn't always existed that way through history and culture, but we have that here. And so you're right. In Arizona, when Arizona firms dealing with a divorce, we don't have to, or you don't have to put specific even reasons. It can be irreconcilable differences or whatever it is. But for us, it matters if there's a certain period of time where that divorce takes place. Yeah,
no fault. So I know you understand this pretty well, because you manage and run your own firm, Westover firm, and so you have other attorneys that are coming to you going, okay, what do I do here? What do I do here? What do I do here? And I would assume that you kind of look at this the same way I do, which is it's fun to support them. It's fun to support to say, okay, well, let's look at this thing globally. Let's, and then, okay, hold on. Hang on a second. And then I'll go and I'll call you and say, okay, what's what here?
Sure.
And I found that that's been the case in everything that we do, meaning somebody gets in a car accident and they start asking about immigration stuff. And I think there's no way in heck this is going to have any bearing whatsoever on any immigration type thing, but just to make sure.
One of our saddest cases, or one of my saddest, and you may not even know this, one of my saddest cases that you guys represented, the plea deal you got was great, but it ended up resulting in the deportation of this girl. I don't know if you remember, I don't think it was your case. It might have been Nathan's. A lady had, speaking of accidents, a kid on a bike had ran out in front of a lady, no fault of her own. She hit him.
Yep.
She killed him. She panicked as she hit him, and she had a green card. She left. She drove about a half mile down the road, stopped in a parking lot, called her brother. What do I do? What am I supposed to do? He tells her to go back. By the time she turns around, they're already looking for her. She did come back. She reported everything, but in that transcourse of whether 20 or 30 minutes, she got a charge for leaving the scene of an accident. Unfortunately, it was leaving the scene of a death and injury accident, which made it worse for her. I think we're still winning that case on appeal. I have it up on appeal because there was no precedent decision, but it was a sad one. Because you ended up getting, a felony 6 on a death case, which is great. But unfortunately, the judge sided with the department's position on ours that it was a deportable offense because she left that scene of an accident, that there was some kind of vile and depraved nature in what she did. That one, even accident case. And that was a criminal accident case, but still, similar.
There's just all sorts of, and so we've got somebody going through a divorce that is married, and they're in proceedings with immigration, something that you're handling, and they're wondering, this person that's asking for me, my ticket to this country to become documented is no longer going to be my spouse.
Sure.
And then you're telling me, yeah, and the thought process with immigration is way deeper than our thought process in civil divorce down the street, just like anyone would be getting a divorce, that there's a no fault. And that's just not the case in immigration.
Yeah. And sometimes we have to advise. It depends on who's filing the divorce, right? If it's the petitioner that's initiating it, sometimes I go to my client and say, look, if you're at all at fault for this, go and apologize. Like, this is important enough to reconcile your marriage, if it's at all reconcilable. If it's my client, I sometimes say, you need to exercise more patience because this is going to affect your immigration status. And so, yeah, sometimes we have to talk in between our firms and say, hey, we need to delay a divorce, or we need to
can we slow the roll?
slow down, or
can this person be
can
the
you talk to
petitioner?
your clients and tell them to get back together or
Yeah.
figure it out? So,
and oftentimes we're successful there, but there's a lot more to it than a lot of people out there might think. And I want them to kind of hear this from our standpoint, is like, it bleeds into everything. And it's interesting that Arizona happens to do divorce, and one wouldn't think, what does that have to do with immigration? Personal injury case, one wouldn't think, what does that have to do with immigration? Well, if that person that didn't cause the accident, they got rear-ended and they were injured, or they got injured in an automobile accident that was not their fault, but they're driving without a license. And so they walk away with a criminal offense. Now, that's not the worst criminal offense in the world at all, and it's very survivable, but they're still concerned that there's any involvement whatsoever with...
And it may be even more simple than that. It may be something like the person is the victim of the injury accident, but they don't have a Social Security card. And so the payment and how that works and how they receive those, and with bank accounts and whatever else,
it gets deep. Right. There's a web to unweave. And so I just thought this morning when I was thinking, I just had this thought. I was like, dadgum, there is so many things that we could get so lost in the weeds, but just sufficeth to say, right? It's sufficient to say, all right, immigration pretty much is a very, very, very key component on 1/3 of our population in Arizona in their mind, whether it be for themselves or somebody that they love.
Yeah, and for my clients, it's a lot of times it's, take away their family and their means of making a living. It's the number one thing on their mind.
Right.
And often those are intertwined, right? Raising their family here safely and without having to look over their shoulder, while not having documents or trying to get documents. Or, every time they go out and potentially get pulled over or are working at a job site that gets raided or whatever else, I mean, it's top of mind for these guys. And
you said the other day, you said shadows, that we'll just push them back. The government will just push them back into the shadows and, whatever, just be in the shadows. Don't be front center. I feel like that's the way the majority of those that are here without documentation live, is in the shadows. They're not looking for reasons to go out and
not their preference.
Right.
Because if you know this community, you also will know that they're probably the most liberal economic spending community that's out there.
Right.
Maybe unless you had $1 million to your name, if they have discretionary income, they don't tend to be savers, and that's not a knock on them. They just tend to be they tend to spend their discretionary income, whether it be, at an amusement park or whatever it is, the few hours they get when they're not working and spending with their kids, they're spending money.
Yeah, they're making a memory.
It's tough that they feel like they can't sometimes come out into the community when we would be a great benefit to, as far as economically here in the state, to what they do spend.
Well, I feel like if we start cranking down on policy and we start cranking down on education out there and having some folks, really start paying attention to this point of view, the issue that we have with immigration could be a positive. It would probably require a root canal here and there, some give and take.
And I'm never politically, there's going to be people that are never going to support any kind of immigration reform, and I respect that completely. like I said, I think we've mentioned it in other podcasts, I'm just realistic with what's here.
Right.
And I figure if you've got a hole in your pants already, you can't go back to the day that you ripped the hole in the pants to fix it. You've got to just fix what's there.
Yeah.
And so for me, yeah, you've got a problem already. It's unfixable, meaning there's no logistical way. It's been proposed many times to just mass deport 11 million people or more. And so you've got to figure out in my opinion, there's some reason to figure out some solutions.
I would assume that would be a high priority for most American voters and or folks that live
it just
here.
depends on where they land on the spectrum, whether it's high enforcement or more liberal enforcement, for sure.
But I feel like you get a round table and you figure, all right, let's get what we have to agreed on. We have a hole in the pants. There's a hole in the bucket. Dear Liza, there's a hole here. What are we going to do? And so for me, I'm thinking, all right.
So our solution right now, right, is just to keep it pouring water in the bucket and letting it continue
to leak,
but keep pouring water in the bucket, right?
Yeah, and put it in different spots, and put the leak in different spots.
And maybe we'll put tape over it, even though we don't know that. We know that's not going to hold the water, but
which has been done.
Yeah, a little bit
here and there, and even that, it just the tape's never been good tape.
It's just getting bigger.
It's a good size hole. So for me, I'm thinking, okay, this really is a very global, interesting conundrum we find ourselves in. You work in it all day long, every day. We have quite a few cases that touch our firm for a bit until they move along to yours, or they're still, or coincide. I love the fact that they're patient as far as those that are seeking documents and trying to do it legally. They're pretty strong folks that way, have some pretty good resolve. And I'm trying to take away the panic without selling the dream. Like you're in good hands with Westover. That firm over there is as good as you're ever going to get. You're in good hands there. Patience. We're going to be okay here. We're going to we can't guarantee them anything often.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, all right, well, let's take a normal run of the mill. Let's drill down on a normal run of the mill case that happens all the time. The one that we probably see the most of are DUIs.
Sure.
And that's probably the most popular charge, period, really, not isolating out those that don't have documents. Okay. And they feel like they're hosed. And so the first thing is, okay, since we've done them so often, the first thing is okay, breathe, and let's deal with this as is, and let's keep you in this country. That's our number one thing, fighting for your documents at that point. And sometimes no, depending on how we go about things. So you send over a DUI for Brian, Mike, one of them to handle, and they immediately see, okay, because we have a question. I mean, that is something they tell us about whether or not they have immigration concerns. And so they tell us, okay, I don't have any documents. All right. Looking at this case as is, it appears that we're going to be able to, handle it to where you absolutely got to check mark all the boxes to satisfy the city, where you got the DUI. And then from there, you may or may not need an immigration attorney. Oftentimes they want to. They want to go talk to you about it.
Yeah.
So fast forward, they've got a DUI. Then they end up in your office, whether it be 6 months later, 2 months later, 10 years later. What's the deal with a DUI and immigration?
So actually, it's kind of nuanced a little bit, because DUI in and of itself is not a disqualifying crime, either for whether it be bond, like a fianza in Spanish, meaning they can get out of immigration detention by paying a bond, or even in a green card application, it's not disqualifying. Now, citizenship, any law enforcement contact that's of a somewhat serious nature within 5 years of applying for citizenship is going to cause you problems. So oftentimes my answer on that, if they already have a green card and they're looking to do citizenship and you've negotiated a good plea on a DUI, I just have to, like you said at the beginning, exercise patience. Hey, you're going to have to give it another 4 years and then we can apply for it. All the DUIs have different nuances, whether they're charged as extreme and super extreme and aggravated and all those different things. And technically in immigration, none of those have disqualifying elements to them. So actually they used to, and we used to have to really negotiate these when we had endangerment elements and whatever else.
And those are when the DUI starts to climb
to a more
into a
extreme
felony.
level. Yeah. So for us, it's kind of funny, and here's where maybe we can reemphasize our concern, or at least on my part, the concern for the client first rather than the dollar.
Right.
Because oftentimes what I'm telling you to do is strategize ways where immigration doesn't have contact with the client,
right,
which means they're not coming back to me.
Right.
So if I wanted just the contract for the bond, whatever else, I could just tell you, plead them out to a DUI, have them come over.
Right.
But truly, I'm
post
trying
to post the bond,
blah,
blah, blah.
and we'll
and
be
now
on
they're
our
in the
way.
system.
And then they hire me for the next 7 to 8 years. I mean, literally. And so I'm sure there's attorneys out there that aren't going
I've never heard it from you, but I have heard it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately,
put
it's
them in the
just
proceedings, and then I get my fee from it. I tend to tell you, look, can you send them to certain areas?
We're gonna tippy toe on that, but yes. There are certain places wherein ICE
or whatever the plea deal is, where we can avoid potentially putting them into proceedings is the best way to put it. And so whatever those strategies that you and I have worked out, that doesn't benefit me at all, but it sure benefits the client. And so just to reemphasize where we both kind of care first is with the benefit of the client. And often that comes at expense of maybe more money to the firm. But yeah, in general, a DUI is always going to be something we're going to want to make sure is taken care of, fully paid, classes are taken and whatever else, because if you don't complete it, then we do have a problem.
Right.
But if a DUI is completed, for the most part, with the exception of citizenship and maybe some other ancillary applications, we're still okay right now. Unless it escalates into something a little bit farther into DUI.
So they come in, they do get a DUI, they end up avoiding immediate immigration consequences.
And sometimes that's the issue, though, right? That's what I didn't mention is that sometimes there's no strategy, because sometimes they're posting a bond, the client, without knowing on the criminal side, and there's ICE picking them up. So,
okay, you just opened a door. We're going to have to flush that out. What does that mean? Okay, that door just got opened. I wasn't going to, but here we go.
Sorry.
So the door is open. Okay. Somebody gets a DUI, they're arrested. And that individual is sitting in jail, and a well-meaning family member posts bond because the judge says, all right, you got a DUI, and the bond is going to be $500 or $2,000 or whatever. Usually it's not a very huge bond,
right?
Depending, but most of the time not. And then from there, they post a well-meaning family member and a desperate individual that's sitting in jail, which is not pleasant. Is begging for somebody to post this bond that was interpreted to them through an interpreter that you have a bond, and if you post this bond, you get out. And if some miracle happens wherein they see you or me before that bond is posted, that is a miracle.
Yeah.
That is an absolute miracle, so the first call these folks need to do, the first call they need to make is to either your firm or mine before any money changes hands, because this is what happens. They go down and they post the bond. I mean, you eloquently said it, but I'm just going to make this simple. They post the bond, and then they just have a bus ride from the jail where they're at to immigration jail.
Which they don't realize when they're posting the bond.
They have no idea. They're just moving.
And so essentially they've not only put themselves in immigration proceedings, but also paid a bond that was completely unnecessary.
Right. So now the bond,
because they're not getting out.
Right. They're not getting out. Yeah. So they don't get the benefit of posting the bond.
Yeah.
And so then they go over to immigration proceedings. And from there, now the game begins on my end, because I have to somehow, some way get the state to talk to the feds and the feds to talk to the state, which is not an easy thing to accomplish. And our attorneys here work very, very hard. And we've done it, and we continue to do it. But it's hard to yank them because that's two different worlds. Mm-hmm. It's federal world as opposed to state world, and federal typically doesn't give a crap about state, and state typically doesn't give much, never mind about federal. And so you're in this Bermuda Triangle, and sometimes I've seen folks in there for 6-8 months in immigration jail awaiting something, and they're just holding out because they want to remain here in the United States and have documents, but they have a warrant for their arrest on the state side, and all they did was post a bond and put themselves in this pickle.
And a lot of times what it does is it causes an additional consequence because, let's say I get them, so I'm able to convince a judge that it's a pending DUI, and so there's no conviction, and so the consequences are a little bit less. Judge lets them out on a bond, on an immigration bond. They're not done with the criminal part, right? And a lot of times, depending on whether they've served their time that day before they posted their bond, if they haven't served their 24 hours or whatever your sentence is, they got to go back once you fix. So then they're going back to you.
Right.
You're figuring out what their actual plea deal is. If they end up having to serve additional jail time, once again, they run into that consequence of immigration being contacted, and then they're now for the second time. And oftentimes I can work that out depending on how the judge viewed the original case. If he truly analyzed it as if he was going to have a conviction for DUI, they'll maybe let him have the exact same bond he had before and just let him out. But sometimes they treat it differently, and they go, oh, as a pending bond, I was okay with it. Now as a conviction of a bond, or as a pending DUI, I was okay with it. Now a conviction of DUI, I'm not. So it's not always unavoidable, but
it's a circle. But it's always good for the gente Latina. It's always good for the folks out there with these concerns to know if the inevitable happens. If we were talking earlier on, they like to get out there and aprovechar. They like to get out there and have some fun, go to the theme parks and go to the Great Wolf's Lodge and go to a Dodgers game or whatever. Yeah. And I'm not trying to pimp the Dodgers. I actually don't like the Dodgers at all. Did I just lose a lot of friends out there? I don't know. The evil empire of the West. That said, though, I did like Tommy Lasorda a lot, and Fernando Valenzuela.
You're dating yourself, man. Steve Sachs, who you got?
Oh, yeah. Steve Sachs. We had Mickey Hatcher. He went to Mesa High. He's a local product.
I grew up a Dodgers fan because in Utah I didn't have any other option. It was the only thing that was on TV.
Us either. I
hate them now.
I went from being an avid Dodger fan right up to 1998 when we got our own team.
Yeah.
And then they're in our same division. That was like cruel and unusual punishment, right?
For us, it was either Dodgers or Braves. Those were the two that were on TV. Braves were on TBS, and the Dodgers got the Fox games. So.
We're close. We had the Dodger games. So Vin Scully is magic. And the Dodger dog. Anyway, and then you had, there's so many likable. You got Lasorda. You got, the lawnmower gig right there in the 1988 World Series when they
were fun to watch.
Brought down the mighty Oakland A's back then, the Bash brothers, so on and so forth. That was cool. Oral Hershiser had a better batting average than the entire Oakland A's team did during the World Series. It was a sweep. If you may or may not remember.
I was 8 years old, but I do remember.
So awesome. It was magic. And it was the year that they had that big, huge...
earthquake.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it was the earthquake World Series. Anyway, so I went from love to bitter hatred overnight because they were spending way more money and beating us all the time, every which way but Sunday, and all the Diamondbacks fans out there know what I'm talking about. But anyway, I still have a little bit of nostalgic good memories of Kirk Gibson hitting Eckersley long. Ooh, it was a pigeon. Okay, so I guess we've established that every little thing that is legally related, and even things that are not, affect those out there that have no documents. So when we come back here next time, let's start talking about that political science degree of yours. And let's see, maybe let's throw some ideas out there that might resonate with some folks.
Sure. Practical solutions.
Yeah, well, let's see if we can, because I mean, we see it, and I see it from one point of view. You see it from another point of view. We understand the problem, the hole in the pants. So let's see if we can't figure out how to, let's spit a few ideas out there. So between now and next week, let's get a few ideas of where to even begin, where to start. I'm going to throw out and start the juices a little bit by saying I think we need to start by admitting there's a problem, and let's now we can all agree on that. Possibly there's a problem, Houston. Now what?
Yeah.
So let's just kind of leave it there, cliffhang it, and let's talk about that next week.